Hello friends, so this is video number 2. Now in this video I'll be covering how the pawns move, right? So let's take a look at it. So in the previous video we saw how the kings move, and this video we'll see how the pawns move. As I said earlier, kings are really a special piece in that no legal chess position is possible without both the kings being present. So for any chess position to be considered legal or valid to be played, both kings have to be present on the board. There is just no legal or valid position that's possible without the kings. However, we cannot have um, we can have the pawns absent or other pieces cannot be present on the board and the position is still valid or legal, but the kings have to be present. Having said that, let's take a look at some of the pawn moves, right? So what I'll do is I'll place a few pawns on the board, okay? So that we can take a look at what the pawns are doing. All right, so I think these pawns are sufficient. And maybe another pawn on e7. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at this position. So there are 3 pawns on the board, right? So this is for demonstration purposes only to show you how pawns moves. So pawns, their original position is on the second rank. So meaning for white, the pawns are actually on rank number 2 or row number 2. And for black, the pawns are on row number 7. So row number 7 is like the second rank from black's side, right? So if the black is here, from black's perspective, second rank is the 7th rank. So this is the second rank. Oops. So this is just a chess parlance that I've been used to, and probably you will also get used to it. But yeah, so the original position of the pawns is second rank. And so why am I mentioning that? So the original position of the pawns has a special significance in how they move. So pawns they move only in the straightforward fashion. Right? So let's take the example of this a2 pawn. It goes e3, and black's pawn can also just go 1 square. White pawn goes 1 square. Black's pawn goes 1 square. White's pawn goes 1 square, 1 square, 1 square, 1 square. Right. So this is how these pawns go. And yeah, there is no other way the pawns can move. Okay. Now, what would happen if there is an enemy pawn in front of your pawn? So let's say white moves his pawn to e3, black moves his pawn to e6, I move my pawn to e4, black moves his pawn to e5. Now here, white's pawn cannot move forward anymore because it is blocked by the enemy pawn, the enemy which is black's pawn on e5. And similarly, black cannot move his e5 pawn to e4 because white's pawn is on e4. So these pawns, we call them blocked by each other, right? So these pawns are blocked by each other. So the pawns can only move forward if there is nothing in front of them. So for example, there could have been a knight here or a bishop, and the pawn couldn't have moved forward. So pawns can only move forward if the square in front of them, is empty. There is nothing in that square. So only if the square in front of them is empty, then they can move forward. Otherwise, they are blocked. Now, pawns again have their own unique qualities. So, for example, a pawn can go to the last rank, right? So this pawn has come to the 7th rank. let's say black plays this king to d7. And now when a pawn goes onto the 8th rank, so 8th rank from his side, right? Then it can get promoted. So it's and it will get a promotion. So think of it like you have, let's say you're in a school and you have worked and you're in the 3rd grade. And so if you have worked for the whole year, at the end of the year, you will get promoted to the 4th grade. So it's like a similar journey for the pawn. So it has gone all the way from the 2nd rank to the 8th rank. And so when it goes to the final rank, then it will get promoted. So it can either get queened or it's a choice. Like it's a choice to the white player on what piece he wants to promote this pawn. So let me just change a little bit in the settings. So always promote to queen. Okay, got it. So let's say this pawn goes to the 8th rank. You get a choice on which piece to promote it to. And it cannot stay a pawn anymore. Like once a pawn goes to the 8th rank, it cannot stay a pawn anymore. It either has to get promoted to a queen or get promoted to a rook, right? Or it can get promoted to a bishop, or it can get promoted to a knight. But it cannot get promoted to another king, right? So there is only one king on the chessboard for white and one king for black. There cannot be two kings. That's just not allowed. However, there can be two queens, there can be two bishops, there can be as many as 9 queens on the board, right? So the first original queen and the other 8 queens for each of the 8 pawns. So theoretically, that's possible that all the 8 pawns go to the end of the board, and all of them become queens, and you have the original queen. So theoretically, you can have 9 queens on the board, but there just has to be one king. There cannot be 2 kings on the board. Now, is that sexist? I don't know, but this game was designed about 500 years ago. So you got to ask the designer himself. I'm here just to explain how the game is played and what the rules are. Anyway, so for white, when his pawn goes to the 8th rank, he has a choice between queen, rook, bishop, and knight. He can make the pawn either of that, and that's usually a desirable thing, right? A pawn has very limited capacity, and so in practical games, players try to promote their own pawns because then they can get another queen. And it's a very similar thing for black, right? So let's say white promoted his pawn to a queen. Black can do the same. So black can keep on pushing his pawn. And let's say white plays a move, and black also has like 4 choices. He can make his pawn a queen. He can make it a rook, right? He can make it a bishop, or he can make it a knight. All right. So for black, the first row number 1, right? So row number 1 is the 8th rank from black's perspective, right? From black's perspective, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the first rank is the row number 1 is the 8th rank from black's perspective. And so when black's pawn goes on row number 1, he has the choice to promote his own pawn, right? So this is a very special thing that can only happen for pawns. This capability is not to other pieces. Like let's say a queen or a bishop or a knight goes to the 8th rank, it cannot turn itself into a queen or other piece. This rule only applies to pawns. Only a pawn can turn into a different piece when it goes to the 8th rank. This particular rule is not applicable to other pieces. All right. Okay. Let's go to the starting position again and see some other qualities of how the pawns move. Okay. So let's try to look at these two adjoining pawns, right? So play this pawn 1 square, black is playing 1 square. I play this pawn 1 square, black plays this pawn 1 square. Now, when the pawns are on adjoining columns, right? So when the columns are right next to each other, and if the pawns are in such a situation where they are directly diagonally opposite to each other, then the side whose turn it is to play can capture the enemy pawn. So here, black has just played g5, right? So black just played g5, and now white has the ability to capture black's pawn on g5. So this is another peculiarity of the pawn movement, of like how pawns move. Let us take another example. So I'll just put another board for demonstration purposes. Pawn move 1. Let's see another board. Again, we have kings, and let's put like 8 pawns. Right, so all the 8 pawns, and let's put another 8 pawns for black. And let's see how these pawns move with regard to each other. So let's say I play e3, he plays f6, I play e4, he plays f5. I can take the black pawn. Let's say black plays g6. Again, these 2 pawns are diagonally next to each other. So I can take this pawn. Let's say black plays a move like this. These 2 pawns are diagonally next to each other. So white can take the pawn again, black's pawn on its own. Let's go a few moves back. So if we retrace the movement, like white just took black's pawn on g6, and it is black's turn to play. These 2 pawns are diagonally opposite to each other. So black can take white's pawn. Let's say white plays 1 move, black plays the pawn ahead. White plays the pawn to h4. Black can take white's pawn, right? So are you getting it? White plays a move like this. Black can take white's pawn. And then white can also take black's pawn. So for your pawn to capture the enemy pawn, they need to be diagonally opposite to each other, like this or like this, right? And then the side whose turn it is to play gets to capture the enemy pawn. Say white plays something like black plays a6, white plays b3. Black plays a5, white plays b4. Again, they are right next to each other diagonally, and they are on adjoining squares. So black can take it. Okay. If white plays a move like this, again, these 2 pawns are diagonally opposite to each other and on adjoining columns. So black can take this, and white can take this. Right. Now let's consider a different scenario. Black plays a move like e6, I play a3, black plays e5. Now these 2 pawns, they are not on the next column. Like even though they are diagonally opposite to each other, there is 1 square missing between them. Right? So no capture is possible. I mean, there is just no movement possible here. So this is not a scenario where you get to capture the enemy pawn. This is not the right scenario to capture the enemy pawn. They have to be right next to each other on the adjoining columns. Right? So for example, I play this, you play this, play this, and he plays this. I have the option to either take with the A pawn, or I have the option to take with the C pawn, right? So these are pawn captures. And finally, I just want to go back and demonstrate how pawns can get blocked, right? So black can move this, white plays this, C5. And now these pawns, these two pawns are blocked. White cannot, excuse me, white cannot move his pawn and black cannot move his pawn. So the pawns are blocked when they are on the same column and in front of each other. Okay, all right. Now I want to cover another special movement about pawns, which is their original squares. So this is something I mentioned earlier. Pawn captures. Let's see. So again, let's put it here. Okay. Board. All right. Okay. So when I began this video about pawn movement, I talked about the importance of the pawns on their original squares, right, on the second rank. So for white, the row number 2 is its second rank, and for black, row number 7 is his second rank. And the importance of the second rank for pawns is that when the pawns are on the original square, meaning the second rank, they have the ability to either go one square or two squares. So that depends on you as the player. So let's say I'm playing white. I have the ability to move this pawn either to e4, either to e3, or I can directly move this pawn to e4, two squares. But once I have moved this pawn, then it cannot move two squares anymore. It can only move one square. So let's consider for black. So black can play a move like b6, or he can move b5. Right? I can play g3. And black can now play a move like a5. Now this pawn cannot go to g5 because this pawn is not on its original square or the second rank, right? So this has gone to the third rank from white's perspective. So this pawn is not on the original square anymore. So now it can only move one square. And again for black, these two pawns are not on their original square, so they can also move only one square. One square. Now black blocks white's pawn. White can move two squares. Well, black can also move only one square. White moves two squares. Black can also move two squares because this pawn was on its original square. White moves to h5. Then now black has this tension, right? So the h5 pawn is diagonally opposite to the g6 pawn, and it's on the adjoining column. So black has the ability to take the pawn on h5, right? And yeah, and I think you get the gist. So practice this for a bit, the pawn movements, and I'm sure you'll get it. So that's it for now, as far as the pawns are concerned and how they move. In this video, we covered a few things, so let's just revise them. How pawns move. So they move one square at a time, right? In the forward direction only. And this is a very important observation. Pawns do not move backwards. Yeah, that's important. They never go backwards. They only go forward. What is another peculiarity about the pawn movement? Captures. So to capture enemy pawn, it has to be on an adjacent column and diagonally opposite. So, and also it has to be one row above, right? And the final thing is about promotion, pawn promotions. So when a pawn reaches its 8th rank, right? Its 8th rank. So meaning row number 8 for white and row number 1 for black. So for black, row number 1 is its 8th rank. The pawn can promote to either a queen, rook, oops, bishop, or knight. It cannot and never promote king. And there is one more special pawn movement that I haven't covered yet. It's called en passant. But I don't want to cover it in this video because en passant is really a very, very special move and a bit advanced. So I will cover it in another video under the title special moves. Okay. So for now, forget about en passant and just focus on these 3 pawn movements. Okay. All right. So I will. So that's it for this video. In the next video, I will cover our knight moves. Okay. So the next video will be on knight. Thank you for watching.